Hello everyone, as promised, back again with part 2 of our Grandmasters versus Ponziani opening series. Now we are going to start off in 1977, Bad Lauterberg. Grandmaster Tony Miles with the white pieces, rated 25.55 versus Svetozar Gligorich with the black pieces at 25.65. And this game started out C3, and we are going to be focusing uh, in this early portion on knight f6 as a response. In our first video, we looked at some early pioneering games from Shigorin, Marco, and then we looked at the gambit line with f5 as opposed to knight f6 here. We looked at f5, dangerous line. We looked at 2 games in that, and now we're shifting into our main line. So one of them is knight f6, and the other is d5, which we'll look at later. So here, knight f6 was played and tends to lead to games that are not as sharp as d5. I just want to show you real quick too. There's a trap in this line. Of course, with any trap, players have to play subpar in order for the trap to work. But I just want to inform you of its presence. So, for example, in this line, at knight f6 after d4, knight takes e4. This is all book, of course, and this is what actually went on in this game. d5 was played, and now, of course, black has several choices to choose from after d5, knight b8, knight takes e5, and a popular continuation at one time was bishop c5. The bishop is attacked, knight d3, right? Notice it also protects f2. So, for argument's sake, bishop drops back to b6, staying on the diagonal. And if bishop e2, or say bishop e2, right, preparing the castle, d6, very natural looking move. There's queen a4 check, already picking up the knight, right? So of course black has to be asleep in order to miss that move. But going back, right, after d5, if knight a5, right, which is another choice, okay, move b4 is practically winning for white already. Of course, queen a4 is possible, but after knight c5, black is able to wiggle around a little bit. So queen c2, and these knights are still in grave danger here, and b4 is going to be played, but black has a little more counterplay. But I just wanted to show you that even in these more quiet lines, there's still like things you got to look out for. And if you're prepared with white and you're going against the unprepared black, a player of the black pieces, you might be able to catch some people out there, especially in blitz. So again, now we're going to return to our main game, our game. So d5 was played. Miles Gligorich played knight b8. Knight takes e5. Is all standard stuff. Queen e7. Queen d4 was played. d6. Queen takes. Bishop d3. And queen takes e4. Bishop takes e4. And this is a type of position that many black players will go for, because they'll take the slight space disadvantage, but with the pristine pawn structure on both sides, right, skillful play, it should lead to a draw. Right? White has slight chance. Of course, he has a space advantage. That's really the only advantage he can really point to. So black does have to be careful, of course, but um, this is something to think about when you're choosing as black which choice to make. So Gligovic is just trading off some pieces, and it seems like he's just cruising. All right, King D7, rooks get connected. And like I said, the main problem in this position for black is the space disadvantage on the queen side. So he tries to generate some counterplay. After F3, knight E5 happens, king C3, Miles holds on to the bishop. And now he starts to attack the white center. The problem is with these type of formations, when you have a pawn advance on D5, this is a problem you see in the Dutch defense and even Alekhine defense in certain variations. When you allow the white pawn on D5, the problem is when you go to attack the center later on, you run into problems with your own pawn structure after white captures. And so now you see the isolated pawn. So yeah, is it a big deal? Is black losing? No, of course not. But these are long-term problems whereby the attacking player can just, put pressure on the position, be annoying, and perhaps you might make a mistake. Knight D2, D5. So here, Gligovic knows how to play chess. He wants to get rid of the weakness right away. Alright, so he's playing in the correct manner. Rook A D1. D takes E4. Knight takes C4. With check. King C7. So now the position is almost symmetrical. Now, there's a general rule. Again, I didn't mean to get too deep in the analysis. We got a lot again. But there's a general rule that I want you people to know out there. And this is something I read in a book called The Middle Game. It's actually two parts by Max Erver, and when he talks about symmetrical positions, and basically they're going to be drawers. I'm sure most of you know that. However, if there is going to be a victory to be attained, it's going to be by the player who obtains the initiative. So in these type of positions, having the lead and development and getting an initiative is of utmost importance. And if you notice here, white has just a little bit more going on in the center as far as his development in this piece play. All right, so just keep an eye on that. So Miles plays bishop f2, bishop f4 check. Good move to have, right? To check and develop a piece at the same time. King b3, rook e8. So here, perhaps better was just bishop c5, continuing this this idea of trying to trade pieces. Of course, white can avoid this by playing bishop to g3, but then just simply king c8, and black's king is safe enough, and this looks equal. However, after king b3, Gligovic played rook e8, which looks perfectly fine. After all, right, he has control over open file, looking forward to penetrating to the second rank in the future. But Miles finds this nice move, a knight e3, attacking this rook. Alright, and also the other idea is to play this move, knight d5, and pick up this this bishop right here. So how do you defend this? The rook on f5, and also against this check. So after rook g5, knight d5 check, king c8, knight takes b4, and just like that, Gligovic has already lost. So he made a tactical error. So basically, instead of rook e8, he had to play bishop c5 in this position, or bishop e7, something whereby he got this bishop out of the way. Knight e3. He must have missed that in his calculations or underestimated the strength of the move. So knight takes b4, rook takes g2, rook d2, knight d4, king a4, knight takes f3, and black just does not have enough compensation with the pawns. And of course he fell shortly after a few more exchanges. and Miles went on to win this game. However, we could say that Black did not lose because of anything special in the opening. Okay, so actually he showed a good way that whereby Black could obtain uh, equality. However, you have to be careful. These are notes to take. This pawn structure right here, although is not a big advantage to White, it definitely has to be attacked with care by Black, because after C5 or C6 is played and the exchange is made, you have to worry about the isolated pawns. However, Black dealt with that in a good fashion after playing C6 and then D5, being able to trade this off. Okay, but the initiative, right, the extra development that Black had, that White had, was able to save the day here. But here's just a simple tactical oversight. Like I said, Bishop C5 is the correct move to play here. All right, and play could continue in this manner, and then something like rook e1. So yes, White has open files, but then say after move like rook d8, okay, then Black should be okay. Although White have a slight advantage, and that, my friends, is a good opening, especially nowadays, because how many openers really lead to more than that anyway? All right, so let's move on. The next games from 1979, Rio de Janeiro Interzonal. We have Velimiric with the white pieces versus Jan Smejkal with the black pieces. Velimiric is 25-15 at the time, and Smejkal is 25-60. So at this time, for those of you don't know, in like late 70s, 2500 was very strong. That was probably like, I don't know, 2600, 2650 today. So back then the top GMs were around 2700, maybe like 2690, stuff like that. So this was like one step below. So these 2500s weren't like how we would view a 2500 GM today. They were like a little bit stronger at the time. So again, d4 was played, knight takes e4, d5, knight e7 this time. Before we saw knight b8. So here we see knight e7. Okay, knight takes e5. Just of course be observant and realize, what does this do as opposed to knight b8? Well, this protects from checks, right? There will be no blockage on the e file, right? A queen coming to e2, and then Black doesn't have to worry about checks here. And then eventually this knight will go say to g6. So these are all strategies dealing with the problem on the e file. So knight takes e5, knight g6 now, queen d4, and we have the same ideas. Queen f6, queen takes e5. Again, notice how the GMs with the black pieces, right, who don't really want to go into these sharp lines with d5, we're going straight into this ending. Again, slight advantage for White. So if you're White, you should learn how to play this ending with this advanced D pawn. Very important. Again, let me reiterate, White is not winning here, but has a space advantage, right? But if you can prepare yourself and learn how to play this kind of ending, right, you'll become a better chess player and you will win some games. As we saw, between two grandmasters, it's not always easy. Right, just an easy draw. So knight d2, d6, knight c4, knight takes c4, bishop takes c4. Right, looks like it's heading toward draw city. Bishop e7, both sides castle, rook e1, bishop f6. Remember what I said about symmetrical positions. The first player to get the initiative will definitely get an advantage. a4. So we see the expansion on the queen side, a6, a5. Remember this pawn formation. This is like a grip formation. The grip formation would be, proper if you had pawns on c4 and pawn on b4. All right, it's great for the endgame having this space advantage. A lot of breakthrough opportunities result from the advance of these pawns, and conversely, it's really hard for Black to move his pawns without creating serious weakness in the position that he would have to deal with later. That is what is good about having this type of structure, right? In this position as white. We continue. Bishop d7, bishop e3. So what I'm saying is that black has to be careful, right? Just because the queens are off and the pawns are, he has a good pawn structure doesn't mean that it's just an easy draw here. F3, rook e7. So we're going to see this doubling. And now bishop a7. Of course, trade off the rooks, right? And start harassing the pawns. So bishop e5, g3, g5, preventing f4, rook e2, and now f5. So we see white taking, black taking more space on the queen side. So far, so good for everyone. Nice and equal. Rook a e1, king f7, protection, protection, protection. Bishop d3, b5. Okay, so black decides that he's going to trade off the bishops. Another decent move I like is continuing this expansion on the queen side. Maybe move like h5 first. Okay, I think f4 is possible though. Let's see. If he takes, then what? Yeah. See? Because bishop takes h7 looks funny to me. Takes. Yeah, you see? Yup. Draws this guy away. Yeah, I knew f4 was there, but h5 is good too. But the idea is the same. It's this expansion of and continuation of this idea of gaining space on the queen side. Instead, he goes for this move, which is understandable, right? He figures his light square bishop isn't as good. He wants to trade it off. However, it's at the cost of compromising his pawn structure a little bit. Bishop comes back, bishop f6, and I know some of you are looking like, man, this has to be dead draw. Bishop d4, and it's bishop e5 again, b3, king f6, and this is, my friends, you talk about rocking somebody to sleep, right? This is kind of, position you just like, you're like, man, you want to go home and watch, something on TV and Netflix. You're like, man, can this be over with already? Because it looks like, there's really nothing going on here. After f4, g takes f4, g takes f4, bishop takes d4 check, c takes, rooks get traded off. Again, we're like in equality city here. And now rook e4. Rook e4. Why not just rook takes e2 and call it a day? Or if you feel that white can somehow win this king and pawn ending, you could play you can maybe move the rook. Maybe you can, I don't know if you want to give up the file, but maybe you can play a move like rook g8 here. But then, he penetrates. So, but rook e7 is a good move too. The thing is you have to be sure that you can protect this pawn if possible. I'm sure black is thinking that he can just move his king here to f5 to hold this pawn after the exchange. But you have to have everything calculated exactly. That's the danger about going into pure king and pawn endings. So after rook takes, f takes, Vladimir played king e3, of course, right? Natural, king f4, and this is what we expected. So now it's just a matter of who has more moves with the pawns. b4, h5, h4, king g4. So this is what Smejkal is counting on. However, he's dead lost after this move. The proper move, and you can research this on your own, is king g6 or king f6. Let's see what happens. So king g4, because we got a lot of games to go through. After king g4 attacking the pawn, king takes, and king takes h4. And this move hurt right here, king f3. Because now this pawn is going to run straight up the board, and there's no way that black can get back. Right, he has to play the king h3, which leads to f5, and then if he moves this pawn, then of course white just captures. So he basically just blundered blundered away the game there. So again, you see the ending, right? Supposed to be a drawn ending, but right, slight complications arise, and we see strong grandmasters blundering away these positions. So you want to save that. Okay, Soviet championship, right? It's 1979. This is again for Limerick, again with the white pieces. 25-15 versus legendary former world champion Mikhail Tal. Some of your favorite player. Some of you guys' favorite player, right? A lot of people love Tal. 26-15 with the black pieces. So, okay, what does Tal do here? Tal plays knight f6, d4, d6. And again, you see another different continuation here, right? So after d4, Tal doesn't play the main line. Knight, he doesn't play knight takes e4. Okay? No knight takes e4 from Tal. So he knows Vladimirovich is a specialist here. He just plays d6. Okay? So he's willing to give up a space advantage here. So he kind of transforms the nature of the game, really. h3, bishop e7. And I show you this game because this is a way that you can avoid the complications altogether. Yes, you are conceding the space. Believe that. This is what white plays c3 for. So you're giving that up, but you're not going into all the complications that you might not be prepared for. So if you're black, this is a way that you can play. And this is the exact same way Anatoly Karpov played in 1963 when faced with this opening also. So I'll just run through it real quick with light commentary because this is not the Ponziani proper that we're looking for, but this is definitely a sideline that you can use. And again, you see the space advantage again from white on the queen side. Again, just equal. Vladimirovich, very strong attacking player. He starts to attack Tal on the queen side. Tal starts to put pressure on the center. So you have two attacking players. Again, I'm just going to go through this game fast because it's not really in the scope of this opening. But I just wanted to show it to you as an option. And plus, it's Tal. So you can see the sacrifice Vladimirovich made. Again, if you want to look this game up yourself, it's Vladimirovich Tal, Soviet Championship 1979. And at this time, black is better. As the sacrifice is scary, but it's not sound. And eventually, Tal was able to consolidate and pull out the win here in spite of the attacking efforts of Limerick. And I'll just leave it there. So again, c3, d4, and d6 is another option that been played at Grandmaster level. A little bit passive, but playable. Fast forward to 1994. This is again Vladimirovich, specialist in this opening. He's 25-25 at the time. Going against, I think he was an international master at the time, but this is Spiridon Skembris, who's 25-25 with the black pieces. This game took place in Belgrade. Again, we are focused on this line, knight f6, and we will be getting to d5 perhaps in another video. Depends on how long this one runs. So knight takes e5, knight takes e4, right? The main idea, d5, and now we see Skembris choosing knight b8. Knight takes, queen e7, queen d4, and now knight d6. Queen goes to e3, knight f5, queen e2, d6, knight f3, knight d7, g4. Queens come off the board. Bishop takes e2, and now knight back to e7, attacking that pawn. c4. Now h5. Now I don't like that move g4 in the position, because that's like a permanent weakness that white has to deal with there. Knight f6. Bishop d7. But notice the similar strategy of white expanding on the queen side and getting that formation there. Bishop g5, knight eg8. So right now, black is just simply fighting off the white initiative at this moment. Castles, bishop takes h6, so he picks up the pawn, and he just has a better pawn structure. And white's pieces are a bit more active at this point. So knight g4. Black tries to untangle. a6, king d2, king f8, knight d4, bishop takes, h takes, rooks come off, and now white drops a pawn here. Rook h7. Another pawn is attacked, and you can see like all of that comes from this early g4 move where white's being a little bit ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but so far so good. The game is pretty much equal because of the dynamism of white's pieces, right, over the awkward piece placement of black. That's what's keeping the game equal. Is black's pieces are kind of bizarrely placed. Now, if he's able to consolidate, it'd be a different story. So white plays bishop f3. And Spiridon plays rook e7. Bishop g2. Now with two pieces on the knight. And now f6 is played. Good move. And this was the idea behind rook e7 is play f6. And now after knight takes f6, the rook takes h7, check, king g7. The other knight comes in. After all, if knight f6, just knight takes f6. So it comes with knight e6, bishop takes e6, d takes, and now black is better because the attack is fizzled out, and now white is just left with a bunch of weak pawns here, right? And he's down a piece, so he just doesn't have enough. All right, so he tries. Nice move right here to end the game by Spiridon. This nice formation. Notice that this king would not be able to penetrate into these squares at all. The knight is blocking the c8 square, and the rest of the squares are covered. He doesn't even have to capture. All he has to do is push this pawn down the board, escorted by the king, and the game is over. So after c5, just simply d5, and Vladimir resigned. So again, that was more of a result of just over pressing out of the opening for a win. But nevertheless, another win for the black side. 1995 Moscow Open. Evgeny Malyutin with the white pieces versus Vasily Yemelin. Both 2,500 rated players. So again, here we see knight f6, and we see this kind of offbeat system. Queen e7 is played. Usually, this these type of systems are played when black is just trying to avoid the sharper continuations, or just is flat out unprepared. All right, so you just strong points e5, excuse me, as in the days of old. And after d5, yes, he has more space. Black is saying, hey, I'll deal with the cramped nature of the position. So here we have this almost like Philidor setup, right? So we'll fly through this, as again, it's beyond the scope of what we're really trying to look at, but I do want you to know that it is definitely a viable option if you're not prepared. Now the position looks more like a check Benoni, right? If we want to go there, and you can play it in a similar fashion as we can see. All right. In this game, White happened to go on and win, but again, you have like totally different structure um, on the board. But just notice that these are possibilities. 1999 player Johan Berglund versus who was rated 2635 versus player David Sundin 2565. And here you see another offbeat attempt by White here. I'm not going to go in this game. Again, it's beyond the scope. But here, instead of playing a traditional d4, he plays queen c2, d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, and d3, bishop f5, and of course, black has nothing to worry about here. Okay, white is basically just happy to just have a opening on the board, and the game is just pretty much flat out equal. If not, you could even say that white is probably black is better at this point, especially at the move like knight f6. Now black castled here, which is fine. Knight f6 is more to the point, just directly asking white what's going on with this d3 pawn. Okay. Our next game between Koryega 2555 and Grandmaster Ivan Sokolov 2647. This took place in Sarajevo in 2002. Again, we see offbeat continuation from white here with d3. So these are just different scenarios that I just wanted to expose you to that that are often possible. Sokolov went on to win this game, but of course, it's not really a result of the opening. And go on to our next game. In 2011, we have Stavik 2612 versus Drazik 2537. So now back to the main line action. Knight takes e4, d5. Again, we see this idea with knight e7, with the idea of bringing this knight along to g6. Knight takes, knight g6, knight takes, h takes g6. So in return for the damaged pawn structure, black gets a pair of pieces traded off, and he has a open h file to boot. Bishop d3, knight c5, bishop c2, and d6. Bishop e3, bishop e7, knight d2, bishop f4, f5, bishop takes, g takes, queen to c2, g6, and now we have this queenside castle. So this is pretty ambitious, as we saw in the other games where white would expand on the queen side, utilizing this advanced d pawn in order to put a lot of pressure on the position. He decides to castle on this side, so it might be a little problematic pushing these pawns on the same side that king is castled on. So white has a different idea up his sleeve. So bishop f6, he just comes to the center with the rook d1, king f8, and knight f3, and now h4. Right, good idea. King is over there, and the h file is open. Queen d7, h5, and now black says, hey, let's trade these queens. I don't want any part of this attack. h6 check first, though. King f8, bishop takes c5, so this forces everything. I like this idea from white. Queen takes c2, king takes c2, d takes c5, and now c4. Again, we're back to this old idea of, again, just expanding on the queen side, utilizing our space. And now black has some additional problems because now the rook is kind of trapped off in the corner here because of where the king is. Okay, see what happened. Rook e8, Rook takes, king takes e8, and now knight e1. And knight, of course, is going to d3. Knight d3, b6, protecting the pawn, and then, black saying, hey, I'll just grab this pawn right here on h6 when I get a chance. But white says, nope, I'm going to play h7. So now, in order to get that pawn, the king has to go here and here. Again, that takes time, and that time, white can make some progress. So king f8, king b3, and here's a problem, these light squares. And this is a problem when you put all your pawns on a certain color complex, and then you don't have the bishop of the opposite color, because that means that if all your pawns are on the dark squares, that means the light squares are weak. And conversely, if your pawns are on light squares, the dark squares are weak. So if you notice on black's king side, his dark squares are weak, but at least he has a dark square bishop, right, to compensate for that weakness. Okay, and then we can even go further to say that those squares aren't necessarily weak because you have the dark square bishop patrolling them. However, on the queen side, all the light squares are unprotected, so this king can have just free reign in here. This means at some point, a move like a6 has to be played in order to at least try to stop the king from penetrating. King e7, right? Black is forced to make a choice. Do I go after this pawn and leave the king side, the queen side up for grabs, or do I abandon this pawn and bring my king back over to defend? After all, the rook is tied up on h8, but the white rook is tied in the defense. So far, it's kind of even. King a4, a6 as predicted. And now b4, of course, putting the pressure on because white wants to advance these pawns, right? He can't allow himself to become crippled on the queen side. Takes, king a5. And this is a problem, right? Now you have weaknesses on two sides of the board. Bishop f6, king takes, c6, and now rook b1. This is very problematic. C takes, rook b6 check, king e7. C takes d5, c4, knight c5, bishop d4. Looks like it's a saving move, but not really. King b5, c3, d6 check, king f6, and now rook c6, bishop f2. Right, just grabbing some material. Of course, check, king g7, knight b7 guarding the queening square, bishop h4, rook takes c3, and now finally he gets the pawn, but at what cost? Rook h3, bishop e7, rook takes, king takes, and then a4, and black has to resign. So that was a really nice game played by white. Right, the back and forth, and it was easy to see the ideas in the game, the weaknesses of the light squares, etc., etc. So I really enjoyed looking at that game. Right, nice plan employed by white in this position. Magnus Carlsen, who was that? Right, with the white pieces, 2861 at the time. 2013. This is that 75th Tada Steel. This is a famous game, so a lot of you might have saw this already. This is against Indian Grandmaster Pentala Hari Krishna, 2698. Can we just say 2700 already? And we're gonna go through this fast because again we know this is a widely publicized game. So after d4, no knight takes e4. Pentala just went for a d5. No, the game became immediately sharpened up. And notice, this is the first time we've seen this move d5. So, is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? Them other lines, knight takes e4 seems pretty solid. But d5 is played. Bishop b5. E takes d4. e5. And now knight e4. So, It seems like Pentala is not going to be intimidated by Carlsen. He just goes for it. Knight takes knight e4. Um, Another idea is knight d7 also here. So knight takes d4, bishop d7. Carlsen decides to part ways with the bishop. And right now we can say the game is equal, right? Both sides have chances. Bishop here compensating for black, right, for the damaged pawn structure. Castles, bishop e7, bishop e3, castle. But we've been watching Magnus Carlsen for a long time, and we know that he's not always trying to get an opening advantage per se. He's just trying to get a playable position that has chances. Knight d2, knight c5, avoiding the double pawns on double isolated pawns on c5, and the isolated pawn that will occur after allowing the capture on e4. b4. Again, critical move right here. One is definitely knight e6. To me, that's like the natural move, is keeping the knight in the center. The other idea is knight d3, which to me probably take a little more thought. But this to me is like my first, like my instinctual move is to play knight e6. This move to me is a little suspect because the knight is just looks so bad there and doesn't really have any prospects. And it's going to take a while to bring it back in the game. So f4. Now we see the advantage in space on the king side, resulting in the attempt by Carlsen for a king side attack. However, we see that being a strong grandmaster he is, there's an idea behind knight b8. I'm sorry, knight b7. It's not just bringing the knight out of play, but his idea is to counterattack on the king side using the counterattack on the queen side using the pawns. Right, so knight a5 being a5, right? Hopefully for him he can get back in the game, say with knight c5 at some point, or even play this move c5 if he has to. f5, and we can see the battle and contrast the ideas. The problem I see in the position is Magnus is attacking the king side is pretty far advanced already. However, black has these beautiful bishops, but he still must play very accurate on queen side. If he makes a mistake over there and slows his attack down or anything like that, Magnus will get the upper hand. Although right now it's pretty equal. Magnus keeps going. f5, a takes b4, c takes, and bishop takes b4. So he cleared out the queen side. This is good for black. Magnus keeps going. Queen g4. And now he plays a tempting move right here, bishop c3, which is good. Another idea is c5. Okay, but that might be met by bishop h6 or something. f6 also to stop this. Well, this is not going to happen right now, obviously, but just to slow down this idea. So, to me, although black is okay, the white's position looks more intimidating. Like, if I had to pick a side, I'll probably take white. It looks easier to play, if anything. Rook ac1. Bishop takes, so it gets rid of the dark square bishop. Bishop takes, and now rook takes a2. So basically he got rid of the dark square bishop for a pawn. The dark square bishop is a good piece, but he got the pawn. So now e6. This is troublesome. f6 is played in order to keep from getting checkmated. And now knight b3. And now he has to move his bishop. But notice that the bishop that black has left really had no prospects. That's the problem. So he got rid of his good dark square bishop, but now the light square bishop has no real prospects. Knight c5. That's good for Magnus. And knight d6. So now, after all of this time, this knight finally gets back into play here. Queen f3, Queen e7. So the game is gonna rest for black upon his ability to mobilize these pawns on the C and D files. Okay, if he can't, and black is able to just attack them and win them or put pressure on, keep putting pressure on the position, black probably loses. However, in theory, he's better because of the pawns. But notice how Magnus has him blockaded. So again, Magnus is just dominating the space and the position. And Harry Krishnan decides to give up, that it's worth giving up the exchange at the knight d4 here. So rook takes, and this is what he's banking on here. And Carlsen displays knight takes c6, knight takes f2, king takes f2, queen a2 check, king g3, rook e8, and now White's position is looking better. He had a lot of pressure on the black position. This passed pawn always has to be watched, and black's passed pawns are blockaded and attacked, not really going anywhere. Also, the plan I see for black in protecting his king is just simply playing h3 at some point and ducking in on this dark square. Black being left with only a light square bishop won't be able to use that bishop to attack the king, the Magnus's king. So queen a6, queen c3, bishop e2 now, and then just simply rook d5, and you can see the position just kind of collapsing. Bishop b5 and knight b4. All right, moving on. I had a phone call I had to get actually. So rook d7 from Carlsen, and you can see like the legend of Carlsen, man, of just outplaying the opponents. Making the position, not making, but just being willing to take the chances to go into a position dynamic enough where there's opportunities. It doesn't matter what the theory says per se on the opening. Oh, this opening is equal or good or bad. The opening is unbalanced enough to give chances that players can have an opportunity to play for a win. And then it's made the best man win. We can see here Harry Krishnan trying to obtain a draw in this position, but that pawn on e6 is a killer. After king h8, rook c8, bishop c6, Magnus or Harry Krishnan resigned rather. And the reason why he resigned is besides just rook takes f8, the stronger move here is even just knight takes f6 because the rook is pinned due to the rook being on c8. Oh, sorry about that. So after knight takes here, let's just show you. Knight takes here, and of course king h7, and this queen g6 here, king h8, queen takes h5 check, and you can see the position just melting. So all I can say about that is definitely Carlsen being the stronger player has something to do with it, being 2861 going against a 2700 player, and also thanks to Harry Krishnan for just being willing to go in the sharp lines, playing d5. Right? He didn't wimp out and just say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna play like d6, kind of like Tao did earlier against Vladimirovich. He went for it, but he went for it and it didn't work out. So let's go forward again. Now we see 2013 again. The Tata still. We see Magnus Carlsen again, but this time on the black side. You know who has the white pieces? Yu Hai Fan, women's champion, 2603 at the time. Magnus Carlsen is going to show us how it's done with the black pieces. Again, not with Knight F6. And I'm going to announce right now, this video is already about 45 minutes, 46 minutes long. So we're going to finish, when we finish up with Knight F6, we're going to make a part 3. And that's going to be the final video. We're going to look at the other main line, D5. So if you want to play D5, just look at that video. If you want to play Knight F6, of course, look at this one. But I want you to look at all 3 of them, of course. You know, then you have the comprehensive overview of the Grandmaster response to Ponziani opening. So here, what's going on here? D4, E takes D5. Remember, E takes D5 is not the main line, right? Knight takes E4 as usual, but here, E takes D5. This is just a mere transposition to the Goring Gambit, which in its own right has its pitfalls and dangers that black must look out for. Alright, so bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3, and now d5 from Carlsen. So we have to take note that, Magnus Carlsen, takes the choice of just steering the opening into a different line altogether by capturing here and transposing into Goring Gambit. It's very important. Being the world champion, or future world champion at the time. This is still 2013, and he decides to take this approach. So c takes d4, bishop g4, just getting the pieces out. Bishop e3, f6, and now he begins the assault on the center. Notice how all the moves connect. Bishop g4. You already have the knight on c6, and then f6. Right, putting the pressure, because listen, all in all, this kind of setup is good for white, right? Having the advanced pawn like this. So of course, black wants to prove that this is weak, and he wants to tear it down and attack it. Okay, has to be careful though, and how he does it, not to weaken his position too much. So castles, queen d7, h3. And now bishop h5, right? Just keeping the tension in the position. Yu Hai Fan decides to jettison that pawn and plays e6 here. Queen d6 by Carlsen. Why not capture, you ask? Well, if queen takes e6, then one idea is knight g5. F takes g5. Queen takes h5, g6, queen g5, and then although equal, bishop e7, queen h6, perhaps can lead to perpetual check. And I don't think Magnus Carlsen really wanted to go into a scenario like that. So he doesn't take. He plays queen d6, again keeping the dynamic possibilities at a maximum. So knight c3, castles, a4, a5. Notice again his style. He doesn't take this pawn. He probably could have took the pawn, but he doesn't want to allow this move a5. Knight b5, and now when he's forced to take it, he takes it. Queen takes e6, bishop f4. Right, looks dangerous, but everything is protected and accounted for. Rook d7, rook e1, queen f7, rook c1, and you can see white's pieces are optimally placed, but black is everything's defended. What do you do? Bishop b4, so you can see black has plenty of counterplay. Rook e3, and here comes Magnus, right? And what's interesting to me is how, although white has the open C file and he has a knight on b5, bishop on b3, he still doesn't have a way to get. And he has a bishop on f4, concentrate on c7. He still doesn't have a way to break through in the position to Magnus on the queen side. Whereby on the other side of the board, Magnus with this move G5 and then uh potentially G5 and G4, he can break open the white king side much easier. He's able to get to Yaifan's king before she can get to his. Knight C4, bishop takes, D takes. Now, to me, this is more of like a concession by white, basically saying, okay, I can't get through on the queen side. So here, instead of losing the tempo, say with like rook E2, something like that, she just gives up the bishop. And this, to me, this hurts white because now you have this isolated pawn here. And again, there's really no way for white to get through on the queen side. So white's queen side attack is stalled. It's queen C2. Bishop takes. Natural move. Rook takes F3. And then now knight D4. Knight takes, rook takes, and now bishop E5. And this was a good move. Good tactical eye here. Rook D2. And queen F5. Queen D7. Queen takes F6. Rook E8. Bishop G3. I think the Chinese Grandmaster is playing a good game here. But black, nevertheless, is better in this position, as black is just up material and white does not have the compensation for it. G4, H takes, rook takes, H5, rook takes G4, H takes G4, rook C1, C3, bishop takes C3, BC5, queen G5, B6, rook E4, and we can see that black's pieces are nice, dominating the position here. Whereas, look at the white rook on C1, which is relegated to defense and passivity, and the black rook on E4. Queen G6. Now more pressure is being placed on the position. And now Carlsen is coming from the kill. Again, he gives up this pawn for dynamic activity here. Queen takes C4, and everything just falls apart for black. I'm sorry, for white. And now white's only hope is to have some kind of perpetual. And I'll just go through quickly, as Magnus didn't really give up the opportunity. King is protected from checks, and the pawn advances. And well played game by Carlsen here. And once the second pawn starts to advance, that's pretty much all she wrote. But good fight. Again, a lot of this can be attributed to Carlsen just being a stronger player. 28-61 versus a player that's 26-03. So we're talking about 250 something points here difference. But again, good game, good example. And it's again noteworthy that Magnus decided to basically switch into another variation, which is the Goring Gambit after E takes D4 instead of the traditional knight takes here. Okay, we're going to go real fast here. 2013 still. Here's Godina, Italian Grandmaster versus Borisek. Again, back to the old ways, tradition. Knight takes E4. We already are familiar with these ideas, right? G6. And here, white decides the castle queen side once again. And we can see here, again, this is a theme you'll see. Sometimes black wants to play aggressive, so his pawn structure is a little busted up here, to be nice about it. Yes, he's up. He's what is a white up a pawn here, uh down the pawn, but look at black's pawn structure. All right, and look at his pieces. So black definitely has to consolidate, right? White is already um, even the material, so black immediately goes into like a worse ending. I don't really understand this game too much because you can't allow your pawn structure to be damaged to that degree and then just go right into the end game, because what are your prospects? What are you gonna just defend, try to defend and hold the position, because you're not gonna win. You have too many weaknesses, and now white doesn't even have to worry about being checkmated. So now white can focus all of his resources on just attacking these weaknesses that you have in the position. So I don't really understand the play by black in this game. Castle's queenside. And now, of course, the systematic trading of pieces. And black's position is so bad that White said, "Hey, I'll straighten out your pawn structure. Don't worry about it," because he just simply wants to trade off everything as much as he can, because he has enough additional weaknesses that he doesn't have to worry about anything. So here, of course, you might say, why didn't he just protect the pawn here? Well, the problem here is, again, here bishop takes f6 is good ending for white. King d2. Of course, there's no way the king can get down to protect this pawn, so f3 has to be played. King e3, king d7, king f4, excuse me, king e7, king g5, and then really, let's say king f7, then moves like h4. This hurts because h4, h5 is coming. Um, let's just play like b5 or something like that. h5. Now what? This is forced, and then the position just collapses after the king takes f5, and that's the problem with going into the ending there for black. The other alternative to protect the pawn is to play bishop f8, but again, king d2, and that kind of like condemns this bishop to passivity for a long time. King d7, king e3. Let's see, g5 just to stop the king from penetrating there. But then you could just simply just take this pawn, or even play b4. You don't have to rush and take this pawn. You can actually improve your position here. So the the black position is in dire straits. This is why he gave up the pawn. He just played king d7, because after all, this is doubled anyway. So bishop takes, king e6, b3. Um, I'm not really liking b3 too much. Why not just move the king, get the king in the game? But anyway, b3, bishop d4. And that's why I didn't really like b3, because if king d1, I'm sorry, king d2 here, bishop c5, now you can either play king e2, or you could play bishop d4, and now your king is improved somewhat. You gain a tempo here. b3, c takes d5. This gives a little bit more counter chances here. h4, king d4, g4, and now of course the idea is to create this pass pawn. King must go back. And it's just a bad ending, because now the h pawn will be a decoy. And Borisek resigned. So basically, bad. This is a bad game by black. I don't really know what to say there. Is maybe black was just just supremely unprepared, playing this move c6 like that. Queen e5 is the alternative, of course, and knight f6 the alternative. c6 c6 is looks, it's kind of little suspect in light of what happened. And now we're gonna fast forward a little bit. World Junior Open. We're almost finished with this variation, and like I said, part 3 will be on a D5. So now we have Lu Sheng Li, 25-33, the World Junior Open versus Benjamin Buck, who's 25-91 at the time. Again, we have this idea. Remember, this transposes into what? Everybody at the same time. Going Gambit. So definitely a viable alternative. Bishop G4, and you can see the same ideas that Magnus had earlier with the pressure here, except that at some point he had played F6, but you can see the pressure is there with the D pawn. Because this right here is an advantage. Given all things being equal, right? It's a static situation. This is advantage for white, so it's definitely on your agenda to get rid of. Bishop H5, again, keeping the tension. H6. Sheng Li does not give up his bishop so easily and just brings it back. So D takes. Exploiting the fact that the knight can't take right now. D takes. And now king to H8. Okay, maybe you can find a better move than just moving the king over. And now bishop F4. Queen D7. Now bishop E4. So you can see that white is willing to go in the endgame due to a space advantage. This kind of situation reminds me of like a Scotch opening in a way, because black, black is very solid here, but like it's cramped, and white has all of these open lines for the bishop. So even though he has like the isolated C pawn, right? As long as he has all these pieces on the board, black has to be very careful, because with all the open lines and the cramped nature of the position, black could easily go astray here. The rook at D8, white goes into this ending. He starts putting pressure. There's really no good way to defend this pawn. Very interesting. Maybe knight D8. Right, but then you just capture the pawn. So knight A5. And again, he could just capture, but Sheng Li says, you know what, I'm going to play G4 first. Right? Bishop G6. But now he can't take because of the rook. So who knows? Maybe he should have just took the pawn on first here. Right? That seems like the way to go. And then so what? Bishop takes, G takes. But the game went G4. And now E6. Rook D3. Knight to E5. Rook takes C3, and you can see this pawn is very powerful in position. Bishop D2, Rook A3. And now the pawn on B7 falls. But when B7 falls, the 7th rank falls. That's not the pawn. So bishop D6, knight C4, rook takes A2. Notice how white is giving up pawns for position. Right? Yeah, he dropped a pawn, but his position is steadily improving. And after rook E8, just simple tactics, rook B8. How do you protect this guy? There's nothing you can do. After rook takes, the pawn with his queen and his checkmate. So just brutality on the board by Lu Sheng Li. Really, really nice game there. And again, that came from this idea in the, again, transposing to a going gambit here. All right, so good game, good example of how to play against this as white. Right, nice conservation of the bishops, etc., etc. Right now we fast forward again. Sheng Li again, 2015, going against Grandmaster Ernesto Inarkiev, who was rated 2700. Now Sheng Li is rated 2570 at the time, and Inarkiev is 2706 with the black pieces. So let's see how a stronger Grandmaster reacts to these ideas. So D4. And here we see this idea again, D5. Where did we see this before? Of course, Magnus Carlsen versus Pentala Harikrishna. So D5, E takes, knight takes, bishop d7, and it's all has been seen before. E5, sharp, castle. So again, in order to compensate for the compromised pawn structure, we see black with the two bishops. F3, bishop E3, B4, and we can see white taking that space and going for his attack on the king side. F5 here. F5 is designed to slow down things a little bit on the queen side and tell white, hey, hold up a little bit. A5 is what Hari Krishna played, right? Basically, he says, you know what, I'm got to go for my attack on the queen side. So I think A5 is a little bit better here than playing on this side of the board. But Anarkiev chose F5. And Shang Li decided to play C4 and give up this pawn. So we can see already, looking at the last game from Shang Li in this game, like he's willing to give up pawns, right? For his dynamic piece play here. C takes D5, C takes D5, boom, Queen B3, right? Attacking both the bishop and the pawn of D5. Well, C5 is really like the only remedy here. Queen takes D5 check. Rook F7. He could grab this knight, but instead he plays knight C2. Now bishop B5 and rook D1. Queen E8. Black avoids the ending and is planning on playing the other rook to D8. So he moves the queen out the way. Rook D8. Rook takes. Knight takes. Knight B8-3. It's more beneficial, just looking at it in the static sense, it's more beneficial for white to trade everything off because he has this beautiful protected pass pawn on the E file, right? A nice 4-3 majority, whereas black's isolated pawn is a little bit more accessible. It's also, again, looking at it from a static point of view, good for black to maintain the bishop here, right, which wields a lot of power on the board. This is why a move like bishop a6 or bishop d3 should be played in this kind of position. All right, it's good to have the bishop here, especially when you have like some kind of compromised pawn structure. But here, if you notice, both knights are attacking the bishop, so black will be able to take one of these bishops if he wants. So bishop d3 is played, and rook d1 is chosen by Shang Li. Now if he decides to take a bishop, then that's going to at least connect these pawns, and you have a 2-1 for black over here on the queen side. So rook d1, now rook d7, finally knight takes b4, c takes, and bishop f2 here for white. Now if white excuse me, and I'm sorry, and this allows, this threatens bishop rook takes d3. So bishop e4, queen b3 check, and now knight e6, rook takes, queen takes. So we see little by little the trading off of pieces, but hey, black has defended itself admirably here. Queen d5, queen d1 check, queen g4, bishop g3, and now knight takes f4. Of course, if bishop takes, then mate on g2, knight d6, knight e2, and so black has done very well for himself here. Knight takes g3, he got rid of the other bishop. Not that it's a big deal, but he's done it. Queen d2, and now bishop e6, and this is an interesting position because this knight is super powerful on d5, but this bishop is also powerful in that it's just an open, relatively open position, and so it's kind of like both minor pieces are very strong in the position, and white's king is a little exposed. So this game probably should end in some kind of draw, right? H6, making a little room for the king in case the king has to, evacuate the 8th rank. Bishop D5, knight E2, queen C4, queen C5 check, and bishop C4. And now we have to say that black is better in this position. I mean, for goodness sakes, black has a better pawn structure. The king is exposed, and he has his bishop over the knight. Right, the knight is no longer in this powerful square, but pinned. Black's king has better prospects as far as being safe is concerned. Only thing he has to worry about, if anything, is this pawn right here. So queen F4, of course, protecting it. And now queen B5, right? Pin him and win him. Queen E3. And now black plays A5. To me, simple is bishop takes. Now it's time to cash in everything. But, I mean, I'm sure he's worried about this pawn right here. King F7. Let's say king E3. King E6. King D4. Right? Nobody wants to get caught in the zugzwang with this baby here and have to move. However, you gotta remember he has 3 pawns up here. So say let's say G5 looks natural. Let's say G5. And now what is this king gonna do besides drop this pawn? I mean, what is he gonna play? If he plays A4, right? Then you can simply play H5 and he's in zugzwang. Like he has to do something. What does he do now besides move away from this pawn? So I'm not really sure if it was time trouble for Narkiev, why he didn't just trade, but instead he played A5. And now King F2. And again, the same idea is right here in front. Bishop takes E2. King F3, bishop A6, and knight D4. And now the horse is running free, basically. Bishop B7, king F4, queen takes G2, E6. There goes that pawn, queen E4 check. Now he decides to check. But now at least white still has his knight on the board. So knight F5, bishop A8, king E5, G6, knight takes H6, king F8, king D6, and at this point, black walks right into like a losing situation as he drops material, and now black is totally lost. And after king D7, Anarkiev lost the game. So that was like a bad loss right there. Whereas after bishop takes E2, queen takes, he's more than likely just winning here. Like I can't see anything for white after this move G5. So he might have been in time trouble and made a mistake and lost it like that. So good game by both players. That's like the highest, high level chess that you're gonna see with these particular systems. Another one from Lu Shenglai. And by me showing you all of these games, like you get to see who's specializes in the opening. So this is the 3rd game we're seeing from Lu Shenglai. So if you want to follow this, play this as white, that's a guy you should check out. With the white pieces here, and then Wang Hao with the black pieces 2700. So Wang Hao's a 100 point rating advantage over Shang Lai, who's 2600. So Wang Hao plays a traditional move. Knight E7, knight takes E5, knight G6, queen E2, queen E7, queen takes E4, queen takes E5, and go right into the end game. And pieces come out naturally, so you can see a more quiet approach here. White has a space advantage, and remember I was telling you about this grip formation with A5 and how eventually you would like to get these pawns here, B4 and C4, etc. And so let's see how the game worked out. Knight d4, and immediately black gives up his bishop here in order to destroy the white pawn structure. Meanwhile, he hands over the bishop pair to Shang Lai, who seems to like his bishops. Another move, if you don't want to do something that drastic, is just simply castle. So he changes the pawn structure here. And his plan is simple. Put some pressure here, play a move like knight f6. So bishop f3, h6. Of course, keeping the bishop out of there. Sometimes preparing to expand on the king side. Knight f6, g4, and now b6. So this is some ambitious stuff. Right? He takes on this kind of like shady pawn structure. But hey, white has a shaky pawn structure too. The difference is white has the bishop here. So the game's pretty much dynamically equal. Of course, it's all in a matter of taste. So bishop f4, king d7, rooks are connected. So now g5, check, h takes, bishop takes, and now knight e4. Bishop g4, king c7, and g5. g5, rook c1, and bishop h2, f5. And very instructive plays, just shutting down the bishop here. Bishop d1 is possible, but then this makes this bishop look really bad. The bishop just gets shut down after f4. Another possibility is bishop to h5. And rook h8, bishop g6. And that's also a possibility. But after f3, knight d2, king f2, and then he just lost a piece. It's probably a blitz game. I try to avoid those games in the rapids too, because there's already enough games as it is. But needless to say, after that particular blunder, black went on to win this game. But just know that white was already, getting into trouble out of the opening. So in hindsight, instead of bishop h2 there, just simply bishop c8, and rook takes, rook takes, f3, knight f6, bishop here, knight d5, and black is better. Black has like a better game. Not saying black is winning, but black definitely has a better game, right? Nice control over this file here. The knight is safe and wields a lot of power from d5 here. Okay. Almost there at the end. All right, 2015. We got Bardo Yabava with the white pieces, 2668 versus Ivan Saric 2652 at the 20th European teams. I'm gonna speed through these last few in this line because I think the point has been driven home. We see the battle, where the main battles are taking place. Again, we see this move knight e7. We haven't seen knight b8 in a while, right? Kind of old school line, but we see this move knight e7. So Yabova has the white pieces. It's bishop f5. Bishop f4, met by bishop d6. Of course, there's this tactic here that black is threatening this check and picking up the bishop. Bishop g3, f5. Again, this has the idea of I don't know. Let's say he played a move like this. It has this kind of similar idea after bishop takes, knight f3 check, and just like busting up the pawn structures here. So knight d2. And so white is saying, hey, go ahead with your idea if you want, but once this pawn moves, the e4 square will be available. So castles, and now he plays f4, of course, because now the black is threatening to keep control of that. So f4 is played. Knight comes to g6, and this is better for black actually. Black has a slightly better position here. Castles, bishop takes f4, and this is Yabova style. He's playing real dynamic. So what he does is, okay, he gives up the pawn for superior piece placement, because now it's going to take a while for black to unravel here. And knight takes f4, g3, knight h5, knight c4, d5, and again, this is challenging for black to try to unravel here. Knight f6, bishop g2, knight e4, and now I'm sorry, yeah, knight e4, rook takes d5, knight takes d6. So there's another piece on d6. So it's like a train station. Like each time a piece gets traded off, there's another piece put on there. Rook e8, rook to f1, g6, bishop d5 check. King comes to h8, king to d2, and now a5, and rook to f4, and rook c4. And we can see that although black is up a pawn, we can see clearly that white's position is better due to his superior piece activity and piece placement. Rook b8, rook c7, and we can see he's just trying to develop that bishop, but it's hard. As soon as the bishop is developed, then it's the pawn on d7 is going to drop. But it's not so much about that pawn dropping; it's about the seventh rank itself dropping. So if he tries to get the king over, relieve the pressure, but again, it's about the domination, and you just seeing like basically a well prepared player here. Good move right here, rook e6. Of course, he cannot take because the king is pinned, or the pawn is pinned to the king. d5. Of course, he doesn't want to take because the position just starts falling apart. Even stronger, the move rook takes f5 right here. Rook g3, but he just wanted to prohibit all counterplay. So now he rethinks it, and now he takes the pawn. Rook d3, rook f8 check. And this is just amazing how black cannot, cannot free himself in this position. And finally, Yobava just gives up the position. Gives up the bishop for the rook. And now it's just simple ending right here. And of course, if you know your endings, you know that Yobava can take that pawn on a5, and there's no way this guy can queen, because why? It is in this square box, the imaginary square box that goes from here to here, and that means that the pawn can be stopped on this diagonal. So, for example, here, 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 and here, just in time. You see? And that is why black had to resign. So brilliant game. I like that game a lot. The key thing here is this idea of d6. That looks like some home cooking there, right? Instead of just say like bishop takes f4, this move right here is definitely kind of difficult move to deal with. So we'll see what maybe black has some improvement there. All right, going forward. Okay, almost done. 2017. Here's David Howell, 2655 versus Mastro Vasilius, 2551. Again, we see old school line. D5, knight B8 this time instead of E7. That way the queen goes to E7. And we can see white still avoids the trade of queens. Notice the ideas in the pawn structure is still the same with this D5, C4 scenario. So the development is there. White should be trying to push on the queen side. And we can see this trade right here. Bishop takes G3, rook takes. Oh, looks like a peaceful enough game. King F8. Okay, preparing to trade off another pair of rooks. So we see this little in-between move. Of course, can't fall into this mate in two right here. You don't want to do that. So so now you have this situation whereby white has more space and that's a better pawn structure. So this is basically torture time for black. Right, he controls the files, diagonals, and then he gets improves his position, and then black just has to resign. So that was just a quick smash by David Howell. Obviously, more prepared than his counterpart to be able to go into this type of position. Again, ladies and gentlemen, space is definitely something you have to be careful about letting your opponent have in chess. So you see the space on the queen side, and it looks real simple, like it's not that dangerous. But space, having control of the open files, etc., and just like the simple style right here of just doubling the pawns, and then notice he takes over the file, and it's like limited counterplay, and next thing you know, the game is over. Let's keep going. One more from Yubava, 2712 versus Bendrich, 2604. Again, we're going to speed through this, and I just want to show this again to show these alternate games. So D3, and this kind of shows that white has other options. And again, we saw D3 earlier, right? But many of the ideas are similar. So here you're just basically just playing chess. And of course, our hero Yubava went on to win. Here's Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, 2793, playing in the Pro League against Melkuman, 2654. The black pieces. Melkumian decides to play very sharp, D5. And this position reminds me of like Vienna game type positions. And some positions that you might see in the Scotch Gambit also. Actually more so in the Scotch Gambit. It's more like transpositions into that. So that's another opening that you might want to be familiar with when playing these. Again, I'm moving very quickly. We're almost at the end. We see again this space here. If black can get around these pawns, right, then he has a chance of creating some more meaningful counterplay. And if not, white will just simply consolidate, use the space advantage, and try to crush black. So here we see Melkuman has played pretty good to create some counterplay as he's occupying the second rank. But the problem is that he tries to go for more than actually what he had. right? So here, instead of say grabbing that pawn, maybe just go for a perpetual at the queen e4 or queen d3. Instead, he grabs his pawn. And again, we know these are like rapid style games. But after he goes there, queen takes e6, queen takes d5, and he just loses everything. Queen a1, Bashir Lagrave threatens mate. Problem is d6 is coming, and then d7 is coming. And then he just lost right there. So good game. It's a rapid game, so it's not really too much there, but again, this is a type of position that you would get from a Scotch Gambit. So again, check out some of those positions, Joko piano positions, but definitely it looks like almost like a direct transposition. I haven't looked at the Scotch Gambit in a long time, but my memory banks are going crazy, telling me like, yeah, this is from Scotch Gambit. You know, um, definitely looks familiar. Okay, that was 2018. So now we are going to look at our last game here in this section. And this game took place in 2019 between Victor Gazik, 25-37 with the white pieces, and Polish Grandmaster Jakubowski, 25-18. And this, again, if you remember, transposes into what? Goring Gambit. Okay, and so we can see again trade off of pieces, and now you have black with the two bishops. Okay, playing aggressively, grabbing space on the king side, on the queen side, right? Not holding back, and black and white will try to get a king side attack going. Bishop comes back, b6. So far so good. Bishop's looking very powerful. You can see slowly but surely attacks being built up. After queen g4, maybe bishop d7. A better choice, right? But it's understandable to see the desire to get the rook on the third rank here. Only reason I didn't like it because it allows this Tempe game, right? Knight f4. Okay, so now the rook is on h6. Now e6. F takes e6. Knight takes e6. So it allows just a lot of play from white immediately. So something is wrong with this idea, because white is getting too much time. There's already mate being threatened. All right, and again, a problem here is, for instance, rook g6. Then you just take because the queen is threatened. So to me, this whole sequence is wrong. There's something wrong with put this knight coming up here, like this. Have to look at it in more detail. Maybe somebody out there can figure that out. Oh yeah, if you comment on one of these games, just like put the timestamp in, so you know which game it is. I know I'm looking at a lot of games. Don't just write in the comments like, "Hey, after Queen G3 or whatever," because I have no idea which game you're talking about. So here, a better move, a good move for black maybe is F5. All right, Queen F3 perhaps. The idea here is after F5, bishop takes F2. And then trying to make something happen here. This check. And see, the bishop is here. So that forces the king to come back here. And you have almost like this perpetual check. Because if G3 Queen h2, and that's definitely going to be at least perpetual. But f takes e6 was played. Knight takes e6, and now queen f6. And now black has shifted his focus, so he was dominating on the queen side, and now he decided that, hey, I'm gonna attack on the other side of the board, and leave some kind of resources here. So here, rook takes c7, so black gives up a pawn. Rook takes, bishop takes, and now queen f4. Bishop takes e6. Now we're in the end game, and white has a better ending, because now all of those pawns that were advanced earlier on the queen side, right now they look kind of weak, especially that pawn on a3. This is a no-brainer. You just take the bishop, f3. Again, white's pawns are very solid. This pawn is very weak. This pawn is very weak. These are the most prone to be attacked, along with this one. So going into this endgame is very problematic for black. This is kind of like, to me, again, the kind of being, literally logical as far as my understanding to go into this type of position if you're black. Anyway, king f7, rook a8, check, king h2, rook d1, and basically black can't afford to go blow for blow trading pawns because his pawn structure is just busted. Rook a7. He needs dynamic chances, but to have dynamic chances, you really need pieces on the board, and this is what the problem is. He can't even really hope to draw. Everything just falls apart. As you can see, I don't really need any commentary, right? And it doesn't even matter. Even if white gave up his rook for this pawn, these two pawns are going to be connected on a 6th rank sooner or later, and queen. There's going to be a queen. So that, my friends, is the last game that I have in my database in 2019. I did not. I left out as many like blitz games as possible because you're gonna see a lot of the same stuff, and the games aren't gonna be as high quality. But that was just all the games with just this move, knight f6, one of the main lines. In the final video, in part 3, we're gonna look at the continuation d5, which is, along with f5, the sharpest continuation. But knight f6, as we can see, is definitely very popular with the Grandmasters, as there was a lot of games. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it was long, but if you made it to the end of the video, congratulations. Please subscribe to my channel, like my channel, click the links below. There are videos, DVDs related to this openings, even books related to this opening, and please support my channel if you can. Again, stick around. We are going to be looking in the next and final chapter on the sharpest continuation for black, d5. And again, give me I want to know your opinion in the comments below. What do you think about the Ponziani opening? And is it something that you would add to your repertoire? And what side would you like to play, the black side or the white side? And also, what particular variation would you play? Are you gonna play the knight f6, d5, f5? Are you gonna play gambits? Or what? I would like to know how you feel about the variation in particular, or why you don't think it's that popular, or in general, your feeling about it. So again, I hope you enjoyed that video. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys soon on part 3.